Hey, what's going on, everyone? Matt Jarbo here with 3 Buck Theater. And I have been a very massive defender of the DCEU, and specifically as Ben Affleck as Batman. I've been all up on this since 2013. You can go back and find my videos, not on this channel, but another channel, where I was supportive of Affleck as Batman when they announced it at Comic-Con 2013. It's been nearly 7 years, and I still feel he kind of got done dirty. But Affleck has had his own problems, let's be fair. He's had his own problems, his own personal issues, and he walked away from the role a year ago officially, and I have never been satisfied with that, by the way. I've never been satisfied by that. Don't get me wrong, I'm very excited for the Matt Reeves Batman movie coming out next year that they're filming, but I still feel like we as comic book movie fans, we as film going fans, those of us who dedicated time into getting to know the DCEU, kind of got screwed on this deal. But Affleck is now coming out and talking about it a little bit, and he's throwing a little bit of shade Warner Brothers' way. And to be fair, I think that they deserve to hear it, if I'm being honest with you. And I say that predominantly because of how badly they messed up, and they messed up terribly, but you don't get a lot of that out of this. Actually, this is what he says. So it says, Justice League had one problem after another, says Ben Affleck. Affleck is making the rounds to promote his new film, The Way Back, and he stopped by GQ for an interview. While talking about the most iconic character of his career, the conversation turned to Justice League and his time as Batman. He says, I had a better time on Batman v Superman, which I really enjoyed doing. Justice League was unfortunately touched by some personal tragedy, a death in Zack Snyder's family, and like I say, sometimes things sort of work and gel, and sometimes you seem to be having one problem after another. I had my fill of that, continues Affleck. They said, would you like to direct and star in a solo Batman movie? And I found at some point I had lost my enthusiasm or passion for it, and I thought this should really be made by someone who for whom it's their wildest dream come true. It was clear for me that it was time to move on. And a lot of people are taking that and they're kind of, they're spinning it as he was like, oh, he's done with it, he wanted to move on. Nah, this is the thing, man. Like, you have to know, you have to go back 7 years. Like, you have to go back a long way and listen to what Affleck has said. This dude is a card-carrying Batman fanatic. There's a funny story he told at Comic-Con a couple years ago about encountering Christian Bale at a party store. They were both there with their kids, and they kind of, had this odd, like, Batman and Batman moment with one another and everything else. Like, but he loved playing Batman, and he loved doing it in Batman v Superman. But we have to go and look at why his enthusiasm went away. He mentions the personal tragedy in Zack Snyder's life with his daughter unfortunately passing away, and we know how that did upend things and uproot things with trying to finish the Justice League movie. But the problems go back a full year before any of that happened. Okay, so we have to actually go back, and I've talked about this before, but it does warrant repeating. We have to go back to the second weekend of Batman v Superman when it opened up. It opened to a large $188 million, March 25th, 2016. The week after that, it had like a 73 or 77% plunge. It was insane. All the trades were talking about it. The Rotten Tomatoes score was terrible. Audiences did not like it. It didn't have good word of mouth because it didn't feel like a complete movie. And we found out why after the fact, that it was because an executive at Warner Brothers, and I don't know who, but I'm guessing that it was probably former Warner head Kevin Tushihara, who had dictated this happening. And so we found out that there was an ultimate cut on the horizon, and that actually ended up kind of, in my opinion, saving the DCEU as we know it. I think in part Suicide Squad's success came from the success of the Batman v Superman extended cut, and the fact that The Killing Joke, in the weeks leading up to the release of Suicide Squad, both films were at #1 and #2 spot on the home video sales charts for both Blu-ray and DVD. So yeah, they made some serious cash that summer, and people were definitely interested. So all that aside, the second week, right? It tanks, it hits 73%, it drops down. And what happened at that point was Zack Snyder was removed from being the guy in charge of the DCEU. He was pulled away from that. They brought in Jeff Johns and someone else whose name I forget right now in order to oversee the finishing of Suicide Squad and to oversee Justice League and to oversee the DCEU. They brought in Ben Affleck Affleck actually to be the executive producer on Justice League, as well as to oversee the editing of the movie. This was because he had just won for Argo a few months earlier, or the year earlier, I believe, and they wanted to bank on that particular thing. So they went to him and they said, listen, we need your creative ability. We need you to come in. We need you to do this. And he was like, okay, cool, I'll do it. But they were already mid-production on Justice League. They were mid-production. Go back to Comic-Con 2016. There is a Comic-Con trailer for Justice League that was awesome at the time. And people really wanted to see that. It's another reason why the release of Snyder Cut movement is as strong and has been living as long as it has, because we got a glimpse of that in the summer of 2016. So they went through and they restructured everything in the whole department. DC Films, the whole department, they restructured it because of their own screw up by cutting out 30 minutes of the movie, keeping it from grossing the $1 billion that it probably would have made had the Ultimate Edition been what we originally saw. We'd be living in a much different world if the original vision of Zack Snyder is what we saw. But unfortunately, they screwed the whole thing up, and they did this again on Justice League. So they wanted them to, they wanted to capture Marvel's thunder. We know that we know they wanted to catch up to Marvel. Everyone was like, you should probably do maybe solo movies leading into a giant team up film. No. Oh, okay. So you're not going to do that. All right, fine. That's okay. Yeah, we'll live with that. That's maybe not the best idea. Oh, you're bringing in Joss Whedon, who, okay, this ought to be interesting, right? Completely different tonal styles of directing, obviously. And then Whedon came in to take over the project, and Whedon ultimately tried to make it a Marvel movie, which is what they wanted him to do. That's what they wanted. They wanted him to do the Marvel movie, and that's what it was, right? And the two tones don't match. They do not mix, period. Point blank, full stop. Warner's screwed Zack Snyder's vision. They screwed over Joss Whedon by putting him in this ultimately impossible situation of which he was going to be the scapegoat. Kevin Tushihara, before he was Me Too'd out of Warner Brothers, because he ended up putting in that hard 2-hour limit on the movie. So there is an extended cut of the movie out there, right? Like even with whatever Joss Whedon redid, because they reshot 80 pages. And by the time they were going into the reshoots following the death of Zack Snyder's daughter, Affleck was already going through some personal drama. He was already going through the divorce of Jennifer Garner. He was already going through his own drinking problems. It was just kind of this bad cocktail that had come together that was not going to work out well for him. And they still wanted him to do his own Batman movie. They were already screen testing Deathstroke. We saw this in the teaser for Justice League. So they had all these things in mind that they wanted to do, but it was because Warner's was predetermining release dates. Is because Warner's was not giving Zack Snyder the time to heal and to put it out there, and they screwed their own products and their own projects. They absolutely screwed them over. They delayed the success of the DCEU by a long time. The fact that Jim Lee came out last weekend at C2E2 and he said the DC Extended Universe, the first time we had heard a DC executive, sure, DC Comics, but we'd heard a DC executive mention that term publicly, is a big effing deal, which is one of the reasons why I'm hearing now that the new Batman is actually going to take place in the DCEU timeline, just taking place beforehand. I don't know how it's all going to work out. We have to wait and see on that one. But ultimately, this is kind of where we find ourselves, is in this place where Affleck may have lost his enthusiasm for it, but that's not to say that it's like not his wildest dream. It's absolutely his wildest dream. He's openly talked about that. He's openly talked about how much he loves Batman. So he's deflecting a little bit, I think, to take a little bit of pressure off of, admitting that there was faults. Like maybe he doesn't want to go back in and fully admit that like he is really bummed out at what happened. And I completely understand that. I completely get that. But if you follow the trades, if you look at the information as it's been presented, you know for a fact that it was Warner Brothers who kept making the mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake, and they're now trying to fix it. And they're hoping that Wonder Woman will come in, and Wonder Woman will definitely kind of recalibrate things. I mean, Birds of Prey was kind of meant to do the same thing, but that kind of crashed and burned, which leads me to ask the question if Wonder Woman is going to suffer a very similar fate. And with the current situation happening around the world with a certain beer thing, popping up, it might actually hurt the movie financially. And I wouldn't be surprised if they move it very similar to No Time to Die, moving its release date back to November. Everything this year is going to be upended. And I don't look to get to the bottom line of it. I don't put any ill will or any kind of attack on Affleck here, because I know I followed his career long enough to know that he's very dedicated to what he wants to work on, right? He's very dedicated to doing these sort of things. He was very dedicated to Zack Snyder. He was very much dedicated to Zack Snyder. You know, he was having fun working with him. He was having fun playing that character. And then Warner's came in because they were worried, because they were freaked out, because they didn't know what was going to happen. They wanted to be Marvel so desperately, but they didn't give themselves the time to grow and even to stumble, to learn from those mistakes. They tried to course correct midstream, and it just screw everything up. And that's where Affleck is finding himself right now. And that is really what happened. That is legitimately what happened. And so yeah, he's putting some pressure on himself, I think, a bit. Like, I think he's trying to, like, you know, maybe come to terms with it, but it's not his fault. It's not his fault. He's the victim here in this particular regard, because they don't know their head from their butthole. And now, hopefully, with a new CEO of Warner Brothers, they'll be able to figure it out. But in the meantime, I really hope he finds a way to come back into it. I hope that they do Justice League 2, that they bring back Batfleck. And as much as I want to see Pattinson, I want Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck together again. Third time's the charm. Bring in Zack Snyder, bring in Gal Gadot, bring in Jason Momoa, bring in Ezra Miller. Do it legit. Do it Zack Snyder style. But I have a feeling that they're going to go more towards the Greg Berlanti side of things, because that seems to be working on television, even though those shows' quality levels over the span of the last couple of years have gone down the absolute toilet. Yet they keep giving him more and more and more and more shows on different networks. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But anyway, what are your thoughts on this? Let me know down in the comments below. If you guys got this far, do me a favor, type Batman into the comment box. I appreciate it. If you want to help support the channel, you can do so through memberships. Links right below. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/groups/3bucktheater. And I'll talk to you guys all later. Have yourself a great day. Thank you for watching, and peace out.